Hey everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome back to another episode of Great Quarter Gals. This is the show here at FreightWaves where we talk to amazing women doing amazing things in the freight and logistics space. And I'm Kaylee Nix here with Grace Sharkey back after your Memorial Day weekend. Grace, I asked this question to Anthony Smith earlier today. Why is it that coming back on a Tuesday after a 3-day weekend feels worse than coming back to work on a Monday of a regular week? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, then you add the driving that you did on the holiday, right? Then you really lost half of Monday doing that. No, you're right. Why don't we just switch it to Fridays? I don't know what's up with this whole Monday or deal. We need to look into this because it feels like a government conspiracy that needs to be broken down, but I have no idea. You're right. I feel like I have so much work to do too, and it's already Tuesday, so crazy but happy I get to be with you a day faster.
Exactly. We're back at it a day earlier in the week. I don't know if it's like the hustle culture of the American dream. You know, you come back to work on Monday. Maybe we need to take a leaf out of the Europeans' books and just cut it to a 4-day work week all the time. I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm down with the European trends. We start drinking at 2:30 and end the week at 4 days. That European vacation, that all works for me.
I wouldn't complain. Let's dig right into it. We've got a really good show today, and we have an awesome guest, someone that I'm very excited to bring on our show. She's got a show of her own. We'll get to Sarah Barnes-Humphrey from Let's Talk Supply Chain in just a little bit. But before we get there, we need to talk about some of our headlines today. We talked about this on FreightWaves Now, and it's applicable not only to the entire driver community, but specifically important when we put it in the context of female drivers. Washington State just now signed a law, Governor Jay Inslee signed a law last week, finally guaranteeing bathroom access for truck drivers at shippers and receivers. And I say finally because this is something that most people would think, if they don't know the industry, that is, what do you mean a driver can't use the bathroom when they end up at a company that they're doing business with? That's ridiculous, right? But this is the reality for drivers across the majority of the country, almost to the point where you could honestly call it discrimination at some points. But you're a driver, you show up to a shipper, you have a 2.5 to 3 hour wait time, and they won't let you use the restroom. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. I actually talked to some of my family members about that this weekend, and multiple were like, "Wait, what do you mean they can't use the bathroom?" And I'm like, "Yeah, people will literally put signs up, lock doors, and on top of that, right, we have them sit there and they're detained for so many hours at a time. It's definitely not helpful for." Creating a better environment for retention for drivers in particular. But as we want to strive to bring more women in, and I think this was something that the senator who had published this really leaned on, well, how can we bring more women to the industry where they aren't going to be able to find restrooms on a daily basis or easily find them when there are a number of situations that women are greatly affected by when it comes to that. And it's interesting too because the lack of bathrooms has been an issue for women for years and years and years to come. I mean, we've all seen that really powerful scene in Hidden Figures, right, where Black women weren't allowed to use the same bathrooms at NASA for a long period of time. I mean, even the women in our U.S. House of Representatives didn't have a bathroom until the last couple of decades. So it's sad to see that something that everyone finds should be equal, right? It's just now being open to our community here in transportation. So it's happy to see this, and hopefully we'll see more states to come too.
Absolutely. And the other piece of that is, of course, the safety conversation, right? When we talk about women's equitable access for restrooms, we oftentimes talk about what it's like at a truck stop or at a bathroom that's not necessarily kept up to par and is safe. And in this bill, or in this law now, it's officially a law, it's that if a company has restrooms that are dedicated for employees or customers to use, then they must allow drivers who are coming to their facility to also use that as well, which is great news because that means that a company can't just erect a separate driver's bathroom, right? If there's a restroom on facility, a driver will be legally allowed to use that facility. So that increases safety because most companies are most likely going to have dedicated facilities for their own employees and their own customers, and now gives drivers an equal opportunity to get in and to make sure that their needs are being met when they are taking care of their job.
Yeah, I really loved how they worded this, because really it points to, if you aren't letting these drivers in, then you got a bigger problem with OSHA than you do with us here in the state of Washington. And I think it's just interesting, the fact that we as a society have to think of all the workarounds, right, to not let a driver use the restroom. And happy that they worded it this way. Happy that it's definitely going to, I think a lot of drivers, of course, are going to enjoy this. If you want to call it, it's sad that we call it a perk. It's not a perk. Again, it should be just something that's common and accessible to all drivers. But unfortunately, it's now a perk that can be listed for drivers running loads throughout in and out of Washington.
Not a perk, should just be a necessity. Grace, let's go ahead and bring in our guest for the day. Excellent conversation, and head on over to FreightWaves.com to read that article if you haven't yet. But we're going to go ahead and welcome in our guest. And we've got Sarah Barnes-Humphrey joining us. You might know her from Let's Talk Supply Chain. You probably should know her from Let's Talk Supply Chain. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn or listen to her podcast on any platform, you absolutely should. And Sarah, you are one of my favorite creators in the space because your voice is really prolific, but it's also very much you. And I love the brand you've created. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. And Grace, I go back to what the Europeans do. I think it's the afternoon naps for me. Just saying.
Yeah, exactly. Mark that on that box too. Thank you, Sarah.
I will take the siesta. I love that. Sarah, thank you so much again for joining us. You are, of course, host of Let's Talk Supply Chain. You have your newsletters that you put out. You've branded a game show that I was a participant of. Very much to my chagrin, I did not do a great job on that game show. I blame Thomas Watson for that.
You did a fantastic job.
But
let's just put it out there. You guys were amazing. And you had us laughing for like 4 minutes because you went and found that bus and we saw the whole office, the whole FreightWaves office.
That was quite a fun time. And I very much had a blast with that and with Thomas. You can go check that out if you didn't. Superstar Game Face, and it aired a couple months ago. But let's talk a little bit about your entrance into the space, both in the supply chain space and the creator space, because you have a pretty rich history, a rich background in supply chain. Then you decided to take it to the podcast waves.
Yeah, so I've been in logistics and supply chain for about 25 years. I spent a majority of my career at a freight forwarding company, which was a family business. I did 8 years of operations, 8 years of sales, and then I was director of sales and marketing. And I thought, well, we need to get our brand story out there. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time. And I thought, well, why can't Sarah Barnes-Humphrey have her own podcast? And so that's what we did. That's how we got into the podcast, or that's how I got into podcasting. And I asked a gentleman from my customs department to be my co-host, and tongue in cheek, we called it Two Babes Talk Supply Chain. And then in 2018, we rebranded it to Let's Talk Supply Chain because I didn't have a male co-host anymore. And my Woman in Supply Chain series, no woman would come on a show called Two Babes Talk Supply Chain.
Oh, well, you know what? I would come on a show called that. So we can do a little rewind one day, one history rewind. But it makes sense. Rebranded, and you literally talk about every link of the supply chain. That's what I like about it. You haven't like focused on just one specific area, or even when you bring up freight forwarding, right? You dive into so many different topics. What do you think? What do you think has been some of your most favorite topics outside of like the work that you've done in logistics as a whole? And what have you learned throughout the course of your show with these different individuals in our space?
What haven't I learned? I think I've been learning every single step of the way, not only in marketing, but in media. And then I have the opportunity to learn from so many amazing people in the industry about what's happening in the industry, where they think it's going, what is happening currently, what do we need to think about as we move into the future. But most of our podcast episodes are focused on businesses within the supply chain. So we talk about who they are and what they do. And then, of course, we expand on that and go into our Woman in Supply Chain series, where we talk about women's journeys, right? What has it been like for them? It hasn't been linear, right? What does the journey look like? How did you get to where you are today? And then further to that, we started a second podcast called Blended, and that's about diversity and inclusion. So I'm very much about diversity and inclusion in this space, but then also finding out who the players are, what they're doing, what they're thinking about the future. And so I mean, what haven't I learned? I learned from every single person I have on my live shows or my podcasts, or even the hosts of the other live shows that we've got on our platform.
I love that you bring that up because the space is collaborative, right? And obviously with Great Quarter Gals, we aim to do much of the same thing that you do with your Women in Supply Chain series and even that kind of blended aspect. We talk a lot of DEI on this show too.
Yeah.
And sometimes people think of us, and if you were to look at like us on paper, people would be like, well, aren't you competing with Sarah? Like you guys are talking about the same things, but that's not the case at all, especially when it comes to talking about women's stories, women empowerment, DEI initiatives. The more voices that are at the table, the louder we are heard, right? And when you talk about being kind of this female starter in this space, specifically on your journey to take it from Two Babes Talk Supply Chain to this Let's Talk Supply Chain brand and establishing that brand, what has that been like trying to fight for your voice to be heard? And have you found it become easier as you've gotten into it, or are you still kind of elbowing for room at the mic?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question because if I think back on my career and the logistics side of my career, I really had to fight every single day to have my voice heard, even though it was a family business. And now I kind of create a platform where my voice is heard in a variety of different ways, but I also have a platform to be able to empower others and bring their voices to the table. And so now I think it's more about other people's voices in the industry and giving them the platform to be able to do that. And so I think I answered your question, but I think I've given myself permission in a variety of different ways to have that voice, but also have the platform and empower others to have a voice as well.
Well, I want to talk about Blended because we got an opportunity to discuss it a little bit when I was on your show in the past. And I know a number of people that you've really helped in this cause as well. Because you mentioned it as a podcast, but I think it's much deeper than that. Can you tell us about Blended and the work that you've done so far with this?
Sure. Yeah. So I started the Woman in Supply Chain series in January 2018. And in January 2020, on my live show, or prior to that, I knew I wanted to do more in diversity and inclusion. And on my live show, I blurted out, I'm going to do more in diversity and inclusion. I had no idea what that was going to be. I kind of spoke it into existence. And I think it was around July 2020. I really wanted to do something like a Red Table Talk, but for podcasts about diversity and inclusion. So October 2021, I launched the Blended podcast. So I bring 5 people from different walks of life together to talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And then during that year, the first year of launching that podcast, I was like, I want to do more. What can we do? And so we started a nonprofit called the Blended Pledge. And there was so many different things that we wanted to do. We had to rein it in and really focus on how can we make a visible impact, a visible change? And so we decided to focus on speaking engagements because what we realized was some of the challenges from having diverse voices on industry stages was travel expenses. And so we give away grants to cover travel expenses so diverse voices can say yes to speaking engagements.
I love this, and I love this initiative that you guys have put forth because oftentimes we hear DEI and people kind of are almost a little skeptical of it because it should be more than just an acronym, right? More than just the fact that, yeah, we have a DEI strategy and okay, it's there. But what are you doing about it? And that's one of my biggest beefs with going to industry conferences is you see companies who have this very massive DEI strategy or trader groups who say, yeah, we're super diverse, we're super inclusive, but you look at their speakers and it is still the traditional white male panel. If it's 2023 and you are hosting an event and you have 7 people up there, including your moderator, and they're all white men, there needs to be a little bit of shakeup around that, right? And so seeing
Yep.
this and seeing this blended initiative that is more than just an acronym, it is physical monetary support to put speakers in places who might have not had that opportunity beforehand. Where have you guys placed some of those speakers, and have you been able to see kind of some tangible impacts on them being in the room and getting their voices heard?
Yeah, so we've given away 5 grants so far, and we sent the CEO of Trans New York to the Women in Trucking event last year to talk about transgender issues and in the workplace. And then we're also sending somebody from Mexico to a circularity conference in Seattle within the next couple of months. And we're really able to bring diversity and inclusion into the conference circuit and across industries. It's not just supply chain that we're focused on. We're focused on across industries. And it's just been amazing to see. They tell us their stories. We post their stories on the Blended Pledge of what they've been able to do, why these grants are so very important. And the other thing is, I did a post on LinkedIn called Raise Your Hand, and I had a bunch of people comment on what they wanted to speak about. And actually, Home Delivery World, which I'm going to in a couple of weeks, they reached out to me for that list, and they reached out to a bunch of diverse voices on that list and asked them to speak at their event. So we're helping in different ways, not only through the grant, but also through the list of diverse voices that I've been able to put together over the last couple of years.
It's interesting too, because like this type of initiative, it takes that strength of saying like, no, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is what I've changed. It reminds me, everyone go check out a group called Trucks VC. Their founder, he refuses to do a panel if there's not a female on the panel with him, and to push that initiative, he's created a giant list of all females that you can reach out. I'm talking hundreds of women within our space, writers, entrepreneurs that you can reach out. So when they say, oh, we don't have someone, well, okay, here's the list. So move it, keep it moving. And that's like, it's so powerful. And I think, and that is coming from a man too. So that shows you, I think, a lot of these initiatives that you're doing, this type of move is going to put different faces in front of people. And I think that our industry is open to that experience more than ever. I mean, even going to some of the conferences I've gone to this last year, it's like men will come up to even myself and say, your not just your passion, but your thoughts and your intuition is incredible to hear. And I think that's what I get so excited is being with Kaylee, right, and being able to bring different people on the show, and not just founders, but I mean, right, Cody Griggs doing the tech behind CH and marketing, and people like yourself who say, you know what, I have a way of really pushing a narrative, and let me make sure I'm pushing positive ones as well. How do you think that you, or maybe in the future, how do you push yourself to use your podium that you've built, right, to make a difference? And is there other areas in this industry that you feel like you can continue to really push that same force?
There's so much work to do, and there's so many different things just for women in supply chain. I am a big proponent of how do we collaborate these initiatives together? Because there's only so much time, there's only so much money. How do we pull people in different directions? Right? We really need to come together in collaboration. And how do we bring women in supply chain together? I actually have a big announcement coming up in the next couple of weeks, because I'm able to collaborate my Woman in Supply Chain series with a Woman in Supply Chain award and a forum that's coming up in the fall. And that's what we need more of, rather than pulling people in different directions. We're also looking at membership groups. How do we get people together on a regular basis to collaborate and talk, like-minded individuals coming together on a monthly basis, talking about what they go through. I mean, I just saw a post the other day about how some women were treated at an industry conference, and some of the questions they were asked, and they were hit on, or they were asked out on a date and things like that. These are the conversations that we need to be having. We need to be putting them out there and saying, no, we don't want to have this at a conference. We're at a conference for the same reasons that you are, and we don't want that to happen. So how do we educate each other on A, how to deal with that, right? And B,
Yeah.
what's appropriate and what's not appropriate.
I think that we are, at the end of the day, kind of the light at the end of our tunnel for our industry is this point of intersectionality is what we're really gunning towards, right? And a lot of that comes,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, from building a community together, whether that's through events or through listening to podcasts or creating forums or taking polls, using platforms like LinkedIn to do that. Building that community creates that intersectionality and pushes us forward completely. Have you seen or felt any type of resistance to this movement so far? And if so, what do we think that needs to be done to combat that? Is it just continuously pushing and pushing and pushing for that intersectionality in the freight space?
Yeah, so funny enough, I think most of the resistance come from the women that I feature because they actually don't promote their story from what we've created for them, either the blog or the podcast. They're afraid to actually put it out on social media or tap themselves on the back. So I think the most resistance I've had are the women that we actually feature and that they don't take onus of their journey. They're not proud of it. They're not putting it out there. And we've had a lot of encouragement when the women that we feature do put it out there and talk about their journey. And so many people come to me and they're like, your Woman in Supply Chain series is what got me started in this industry. It's what got me excited. And we as women need to pat ourselves on the back and we need to be able to promote ourselves. So I think that's really where I've seen a lot of the resistance. I haven't seen too much on the diversity and inclusion, the blended side, but still learning, having conversations. These are really authentic conversations. So people's real perspectives, real authenticity. Some people are going to agree. Some people aren't going to agree. But at the end of the day, we need to listen really to learn and to grow and to move forward. And that's what all of this does.
Yeah, I think that as a whole, our industry's done a really great job with women, diversity. I think we've gotten into, but I'd love to even see more action behind even ourselves, right, when it comes to LGBTQIA plus groups and et cetera. And that's, I mean, that could go into a whole other episode today too. So we'll definitely hit on that. I guess one last question I have for you to take it back to the content that you hit. What's like the hottest topics for you right now? Who are you looking for to bring on the show? What are areas that your audience is saying, hey, I want to hear this about this topic from Sarah's point of view?
I think cybersecurity. I have spoken about cybersecurity more in the last couple of weeks than I have over the last couple of years. And with the introduction of AI, some of the stories I heard at a conference last week when I was moderating a panel, I mean, you know, AI can take your voice and call your CFO and pretend they're the CEO and ask the CFO to transfer some money. And then they transfer the money and the CEO's like, where did this go? And the CFO's like, well, you called me. And the CEO's like, I didn't call you. Like that is some serious business. And that's some of the things that we have to be worried about as supply chain professionals. I mean, cybersecurity is one of the biggest risks in 2023 right now.
You know, we at FreightWaves, we fight to get spam texts from our CEO, Craig Fuller, like all the time. We fight against those spam texts, I should say. So if any of y'all are watching this, if Spencer calls you, it's not Spencer. It's just ignore it. Just ignore the call.
What have I started?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness.
And I just want to say, before we go or anything like that, how much I admire the two of you. And thank you so much for what you're doing with Great Quarter Gals, what you've done coming on the show, like the game show, coming on the Woman in Supply Chain series, and really just collaborating together and not, you know, thinking of us as competitors. I love that. And I love both of you. So.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. We love you back. If people want to either get in touch with you or learn about some of those stories, hear the Blended podcast, check out the Blended Initiative, where can they go to do that?
Let's talk supplychain.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Easy peasy enough. Thank you so much again for joining us. Head on over to letstalksupplychain.com. And like I said earlier, give Sarah a follow on LinkedIn because she makes these beautiful graphics. I don't know if it's like Canva or what you do for them, but they're gorgeous.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, ladies.
Absolutely. And you can catch her up on her website or on her LinkedIn page. Grace, we are done here for your Tuesday or your Monday after Memorial Day, if you want to talk about it like that. Where can the people catch you? And you're going to be in Cleveland, Ohio with us in just about 3 weeks.
Yes, I will, because we're doing the radio show live from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, baby. Of course I'm going to be there. I'm super excited. And you can check out the show every day as well, Monday through Friday from 5 to 7 on the Road Dog Trucking Channel 146 tonight. Tuesday means Thomas is with us, so we're going to get some laughs from him, I'm sure of that.
Thomas was in studio today for our carrier updates. He's in a mood, so you're going to get some laughs on this Thomas Tuesday. Go and buy your tickets for the Future of Supply Chain right now. We are running a special buy one, get one right now, but that ends tomorrow, May 31st. So go get those tickets. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the morning.